in love with us again. Have you ever been around someone that complained all the time? I know in my years as a military wife before my husband retired, complaining seemed to be the national pastime in the military. We complain about everything. And I got on board after a while. It didn't take me too long. We had lived in the United States. It felt nice and comfortable. My husband didn't have to be gone much. And then we moved to a military base in Germany. And he was with the infantry unit, and they were gone probably about half the year. I didn't like it. I was in a foreign country, two small boys, homeschooling them, and life wasn't nice. It was strange. It was weird, and he was gone all the time, and I was by myself. And I used to take walks with the pastor's wife. We'd walk out in the woods to a playground in the woods where the boys could play, and she and I would talk and chat. And one day she said to me, "Joyce, you need to stop complaining about this military life. What if," interesting words, "what if this military life is God's financial way of providing for you?" I had to stop and think about that. In fact, as I thought about it a long while, and as you can tell, my boys are now adults, have kids of their own, and that statement has stayed with me for years. What if this is God's financial way of providing for you? It was true. It was what God had provided. And when we start to look at the fact that we can't go anywhere that God doesn't allow us to go, we can't be anywhere that God doesn't want us to be or allow us to be, and He continuously directs our steps if we focus on Him and we turn from our old ways and focus to what He wants, then I was exactly where God wanted me to be, whether I liked it or not. And so then I had two choices. I could learn to be grateful for where I was and what I had, or I could be upset about it. So what does being grateful do to our marriages and our relationships? Let me just talk to you about this before I tell you more stories. When we have this whole situation where we're not grateful about what we have, we can complain about everything. We can complain about where we live, about what we don't have, about how long our husbands work, how much money we have or don't have, how much we have to work, how much the kids don't obey, how much we don't like the church, we don't like the music, we don't like this, we don't like that. The weather's too cold, the weather's too rainy, the weather's too hot. Oh, we can do everything about the weather all day long. How sick we've been, how much we don't like this, how much we don't like that. And believe me, I can get caught up in this. I have for years. Excuse me. But I've also learned that it doesn't make me happy. I don't get happy by complaining. I bet you don't either. And I know that I don't like to be around people that complain all the time. They make me feel yucky. And guess what? Our husbands don't want to be around us when we complain all the time. Fact is, in Eggerich's book, Love and Respect, he talks about how men see complaining. When it talks about respect, they actually see our complaining as saying they are not enough. Now, I might think I'm talking about my house, or I don't like the way it looks, or I need new carpet, or I need new this, or I don't like this, that. But our husbands say, I'm not enough. I can't provide for you enough. I'm not taking care of for you enough. You don't think I'm good enough for you. You don't think I do my job right. You don't think I do this right. You don't think I do that right. You don't think I parent right. You don't think I do anything around the house right. And I can tell you, who wants to be around a person that constantly says, you are not enough? I know I don't. And I'm assuming our guys don't too, including yours. We don't like to be told how much we don't do things right. In fact, as I can tell you, it's one of the reasons I love talking to you through videos, because it's so much easier for me to tell you those things through a video than have to tell you face to face. But gals, our complaining is ruining our relationships and particularly our marriages. I told you about the story with Franca. Let me tell you about another one. I've complained a lot. I complained a lot about how long my husband worked. And yes, in the military, he did usually work 12-hour days. I didn't like it. And then when he was gone, I had to raise the kids by myself. We were by foreign countries, and there's all kinds of things I didn't like about it. But yes, God was providing it for us financially. My husband was doing a job that he felt God had called him to do, wanted to protect our nation and to provide for us as a family. He was a godly Christian man. He still is. We both got saved about 2 years after we got married, which is right around 40 years ago, so I'm excited about that. But God had let us see some wonderful things. And some of my best memories of the military is our time in Europe, in Germany. We wouldn't have been able to do the things and travel the way we did. We've talked about that now that he's retired and has his own business. I have this business. We wouldn't have been able to do the things in Europe if God hadn't placed us in Germany for so many years. Because of that, because of the multiple moves we've had, which I started to complain about those, and then I saw that every time those orders went across someone else's desk, they had already gone over God's desk first. And God said, yes, it's okay to send them there. So I was, every place I went, I was where God wanted me to be. And I believe that right now, unless you're in an abusive situation, that you are where God wants you to be. Abuse and addictions notwithstanding. There's, that saying, to bloom where you're planted. What does that mean? That means to look right here where we are, where we're living today, and figure out what are the good things with what we have today. I like Philippians 4:8, where it says to think on these things. And it tells a whole list of things to what to think about. It starts off with whatever is true. Well, I could complain that I don't like being here in Germany. Well, yes, that was a true statement. But the other truth was God had allowed us to be sent there. And if God had allowed us to be sent there, he had things for me to learn. He had a purpose for us to be there. And he had people he wanted us to reach. Even when we're in bad situations, God promises that when we focus on him, he'll help us find the good in those things, or what is good besides those. It's not always feeling good to us. Living in a foreign country wasn't good for me at first, but we ended up spending 9 years there over two different times. There was a separation of about 4 years in between. Maybe it was a little longer than that. Let's say about 16, probably 10 years in between. We spent about 3.5 years, and then we came back for another almost 6.5 years, so another 6 years plus. So we spent a lot of time in Germany, in Europe. And yes, I have very fond memories of it. But I had to learn how to trust God in the situation. I told you I didn't like how long my husband worked. He was working these 12-hour days. And so I had to really figure out, well, is he doing what God wants him to be doing? I didn't know for sure. I didn't do what I thought he should be doing, but I'm not God. I'm also wasn't in the military. I was a military wife, but not in the military. And I didn't know what his bosses were requiring of him. And believe me, they kept saying over and over again that my husband was doing excellent work. So I had to say, well, I guess he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. So then how do I learn to live with these situations that I don't like? I told you I was going to talk about part of that. He worked long hours. How did I learn to live with that? I decided to not complain. But I had 2 boys that were ADHD. They've since either one's outgrown it, one's learned to live with it, and how to make it work for him. But how did we come up with a schedule that was going to work for me, who I'm an organized person, I like schedules, it was best for our kids to have a schedule. I said, okay, dinner's going to be at 6 o'clock. Why? Because that worked for me. And my husband said sometimes he could get home at 6. So I had dinner ready at 6, and kids and I ate at 6 every night. I set a place for my husband every time I knew he was in town. If he wasn't home by the end of dinner, I kept it warm on the stove or wherever on the counter until we were finished with dinner. And then I'd make him a plate and put it in the refrigerator. And then he could heat it in the microwave when he got home. Or else it was in the refrigerator. And I put it away the next day. But it took away all that tension and the complaining. And he didn't hear his wife say, you never get home. You're always working late. I never get to see you. One of the other things we did to resolve that was we started having calendar dates. And yes, I still work with a great big huge calendar, and I didn't bring it in here today into my office, but I do have a great big calendar. And we still go over our calendar date. What are you doing? What am I doing this week? And we particularly planned to make sure we had time together each week that he was home. And yes, sometimes we had to take pizza into the office where he had an overnight duty, and we could sit out in the hall with him or talk to him through a window, and we could sit and chat, or we could go over to the bowling alley because he had to still be on base, and we could sit and have a meal. But we got to spend some time together. Complaining doesn't help. It didn't solve the issue. For years, I complained about how I was raised and what my past was like. And I remember we've been married probably 30 years, and we were on a Christian marriage retreat. And sorry, my hair keeps falling in my face today, so forgive me. I'm trying to learn not to do that. I'm going to not complain about myself, but just forgive me for that, please. But we've been at a Christian retreat, and they talked about what is it you need to say to your spouse. And we were out. I know we were living in Hawaii at the time, beautiful place, but it was interesting. But we were out on this peninsula, and my husband and I were out kind of here out in the garden, and he said, Joyce, I wanted to tell you. Oh boy, get ready when your husband says that. He said, I wish you'd stop talking about your past and complaining about your past. Your past is your past. You need to live in the present. Oh, man, that hurt. But at the same time, I realized how much I had complained and blamed my past for my present. It wasn't doing me any good. It had been 30 years since I'd lived, well, more than 30 years since I went to college. It's been more than 30 years since I lived at home, probably closer to 35, 40 years since I lived at home. And it didn't need to affect me now. It wasn't where I currently lived. It wasn't my current. So, another story. I was traveling around Europe. I had the opportunity and the pleasure to be European president for a women's ministry in the military called Protestant Women of the Chapel. And I got to serve as a term as European president. And during that year, I got to do a lot of traveling throughout Europe and going and speaking to women's groups, military bases around Europe. And I had been to different ones, and every one of them would seem to be complaining about where they were and what they were doing and how the base wasn't this and it wasn't that. And as I said, complaining, I think, was a habit and a hot topic, and maybe even a disease in the military. At least it was very catching, very easy to catch it. So I was down at this base, and I was in Turkey at the time, and it wasn't the best place for people to live. The women had to be escorted off base and all kinds of things, and they felt very, very much isolated. But I was there, and these women started complaining to me again, and I can tell you, it just felt like the Holy Ghost rise up in me one time, and I just said, I got mad. We were in a prayer circle, and I just said, ladies, this cannot be the worst place in the world to live. And they kind of looked at me like, why? I said, because every last place I've been has been the worst place. And we all started chuckling. I said, the truth of the matter is, God places us where he wants us to be. He allows the circumstances around us for us to learn and grow. And he tells us to look for the good things. What are the good things with where we are? I remember a time when I was in the hospital. My husband was in the hospital at Walter Reed. He was having some major surgery. They were doing some things that tried to keep him alive, and it was awesome surgery, and God's blessed it, and the miracles happened, and he's here. But as I was sitting there at that moment, not knowing whether my husband would live or die at that point in time, I really felt like I was praying to God, and I felt like him saying to me, Joyce, there's still some good things here. You're kind of like, okay, I'm sitting here watching my husband, praying he'll be healed, not knowing whether he's going to live or die. What are the good things? And God said, number one, you're still talking to me. That means you still believe I'm God. I said, yes, you're still God. You still believe I hear your prayers. Yes, I still believe I hear your prayers. That's why I'm talking to you. And you still believe I have some way of altering the situation, fixing the situation, or bringing good out of it. I said, yes, I do. So even in that hospital room, God reached out and touched me and said, Joyce, here are some good things to look at. God's still God. He still hears our prayers. And regardless of your situation, he will change us, or he'll change the situation, or he'll help us get through the situation so we can get to the other side. And then so many times I get to look back at those. Was that a good time at the time? No, but God says he'll bring good out of our bad situations. And in that one, I got to see this story I get to tell over and over again of how God blessed me and gave me his word, how much he was really there. But what does a complaining spirit do? First off, it takes our eyes off of God. Why do we go to church and sing hymns of praise, or we sing praise and worship music? So we can get our eyes off of us and our complaining things and look at the good things around us and the good things that God are doing. You know, people say to me, Joyce, my husband just is angry at me all the time. I said, how much complaining are you doing? How much criticizing are you doing? But Joyce, what do I do with this? I don't like it. awful. It's horrid. Well, I've got a whole library full of videos you can watch. Check them out on Facebook. They'll soon be on YouTube. And or contact me. Talk to a coach. Read some of my blogs. Follow my Facebook page. Join my Facebook group. Lots of things you can do. Find out some other person you can follow, some other Christian leader. Particularly, I love for women to talk to other women because we see things from a different perspective. And what do? But a grateful heart will not only change your attitude, but it'll also change your marriage. What is it like to be with someone that's joyful? You know that old saying that if ain't mama happy, ain't nobody happy? Well, it's so true. If you're in your household and you're complaining and unhappy and can't stand anything and you're ungrateful, then nobody's happy. So what kinds of things do we need to be grateful for? First off, let's be grateful that we have a husband. We can be grateful that God is still God, regardless of our circumstances. And that wherever we live, God has placed us there or allowed us to live there for His purposes. We can be grateful that God, no matter our circumstances, is always in control. We can be grateful that God never, ever, ever, ever leaves us alone. Never. No matter how lonely you feel or how isolated you feel, even people who have been in prisoner of war camps have talked about their reliance on God, that God never left them alone. That's some of the worst circumstances I can think about. But God never leaves us alone. He's always with us. He always loves us. He's always caring for us. And He is always there every time we turn to Him. Can we complain? Yes, we can. It's easy. That is, I think, the more we get around it, it's like a disease. We tend to catch it. It tends to catch us like the flu or like the COVID thing does right now in this pandemic thing we're going through. And I know some of you probably feel isolated with that. And I can't stand wearing the mask either, and I'm praying it goes away soon so we don't have to do that. But it doesn't help to complain. Even my complaining about it doesn't change it. Complaining about what's going on around you doesn't change it. But being grateful and having a grateful heart does. Sometimes gals will tell me he doesn't do any work around the house. And I go, okay, what has he offered to help with, and what have you told him when he did it? So I have some gals say, well, he tried to help with the dishes, and then he put them all in the dishwasher wrong, so I had to tell him it was all wrong, and I had to go back and do it myself. You know what that does to somebody? They don't want to do dishes for you anymore. They don't want to help. Hi, glad you're here and join me, Marie. So glad to see you again. But people don't want to help us when we complain about the job they do. I know when we used to be out camping with my dad, if I ever complained about the pancakes or the little black spots on the eggs when we ate them, it was like, well, you complain and you're the cook the next morning. Same thing happens in our houses. We complain about the way our husbands cook, or about the way they do the dishes, or the way that they discipline or don't discipline the children. They won't do any of it ever again because we're complaining about how they do it. What we're saying is, you're not good enough. You can't do this right. And then some gals will tell me, well, he never comes home. I said, why would he want to come home if you're complaining about him all the time? It's much better to be someplace else. We don't like to be around people that complain. We like to be around people that are grateful and thankful. Do you know there's so much power in saying thank you? Thank you for helping me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for working so hard to help us to live financially. Even if you're working yourself, thank you that you worked together for this. Thank you that you chose me to be your wife. Most of us don't get married under the gun like a shotgun, like old days when Grandpa, Dad would say, you marry her or you're going to shoot you. You know, that doesn't usually happen to us. Usually we choose it, and we get to say yes. And they say yes. And I think every time I complain about this man that I chose to marry, I'm complaining about the husband that God gave me. This man that God wants me to be with and live my life with. Have I complained through the years? Oh, yes, 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 yes. I thought I was never going to get rid of this habit. And I can tell you that one of the things that helped me to really deal with this habit is God allowed me to have a traumatic brain injury that ended up in brain surgery. And dealing with all the pain of that and the pain before and the pain during the pain recovery time, I got a much more grateful attitude. And I hope you will do the same before you have to go through something so horrible. Or you have to sit there and wonder, is your husband going to live or die? And that you will be able to find the gratefulness. There are so many things that talk about the benefits of a grateful journal, to actually turn your heart around, to come up with 1,000 reasons to be grateful, one a day for 1,000 days. Or that gratefulness can actually change your heart and your countenance from being disappointed and depressed to being joyful and happy. And it can drastically change your marriage. You want to not work so hard? Don't complain about it when your husband wants to help. And don't go around behind him and refold the towels. I know. Sometimes that's hard to do. And you have to live with it not being exactly as you want. But you got some help. Look at the bright side. I know. I'm one of those gals that sees that glass that, proverbial, anyway, the glass that's half empty. I always see it like half empty. I always have. And to have to say, yes, it may be half empty, but it's also half full. That's where I got to. I couldn't change that born tendency of mine to see things as half empty. But I can say it's half full. There are good things in it, the midst of whatever else is going on. And even in the midst of that brain surgery, I remembered God is with me. He never, ever leaves me. It doesn't matter whether I live here on earth with pain, without pain, or whether I go on to heaven. God will never, ever leave us alone. I don't care what your situation is. God never leaves you alone. Gratefulness changes that, and be thankful for that. Be thankful that's where you live. If you live in the United States, folks, we have so many blessings. Multiple blessings, more than we can ever count here. Some other people in the world don't have it as good as we do. And yet we tend to be the people that complain so much. We're coming up on elections here real soon, and I hope you go vote for what your conscience tells you to do. Because we have that ability and that right to vote in this country, to make our decisions and desires known for what we want our government to look like. What a privilege. What a privilege to be able to have a part in that. What a privilege to be able to live in a country that's so affluent. What a privilege to be able to live with such wonderful doctors around. To be able to have so many churches on a church corner that you can pick anyone you want. We've got so many benefits here. Yes, your life is probably not what you wanted. Most of us don't have our lives just like we wanted. Or we just like some part about our body. Or we just like some part about our situation. We dislike something about our husband. There's always going to be something we dislike. I can just tell you that it's never going to go away unless you can really become super, super good, which you might, and only look at the good things. But even so, you see the bad and you say, but where's the good in it? Yes, I may not like the way my husband folds clothes, but I love the fact that he folds them. Which is more important? To have my husband fold the clothes and love the man that does it and have a good relationship, or to have the clothes folded and put away the way I want? Is that one hard for you to decide? Not when I really think about it. When I want my marriage to be good, I have to remember to be grateful for what I have, not what I don't have. When you do, I can tell you that your love relationship with your husband will increase. You'll want to spend more time together. I bet when you were dating, you didn't complain to him all the time. Maybe you did. But if so, he married you despite that. And if he's got a bad habit, you probably do too. Your bad habit might be complaining. I know some of the best things I have done, and I talk about this with women all the time, is change myself. Try to become the woman that God wanted me to be. And as I became that, my husband then responded to that. He responded in the way that let us do things together. You don't need to carry all the workload, but if you complain about it, guess what? You probably are, if you're going to complain about how he helps. Most people will stop doing it when you complain about it. Now, there's a difference between teaching our children how to do things. That's a responsibility God gives us. But he doesn't tell us to teach our men how to do things. We're to love them like God loves us and trust God to work in our husbands. An attitude of gratitude is such a trite phrase, I know, but it works wonders in your marriage. You want to win your husband back. Maybe you've been married 10, 15, 20, 30, or 40 years or more. And you want your husband to fall in love with you again. Become a woman that acts and thinks and chooses to speak on the gratitude, the things that you're grateful for. What do you do with the rest? Tell God about them.